And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Rhett Power. Given we only have 20 minutes, I'm not going to give you his entire bio. I'll give you the highlights. So, Rhett co-founded Wild Creations in 2007 and built a startup toy company into the 2010 fastest growing business in South Carolina. He's the co-founder at Courageous Leadership, which is a cool leadership consultancy that helps you believe again. It's an amalgamation of experienced behavioral scientists, entrepreneurs, best-selling authors, and breakthrough story makers who've worked with and helped grow some of the largest, most relevant brands on the planet, such as Google, Snapchat, Major League Baseball, etc. He's got obviously several books. He's been on CNN, Huffington Post, and I am happy he is lowering his standards to join me today. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Peter. You raised my standards. How about that?
Oh, there you go. Why, thank you. So how does one go from, like, if I look at some of the highlights here, consultancy, toy company, speaker, CNN, clearly there's a logical way to connect all those dots, but I'm going to need you to give me the decoder ring. How the heck did you get here?
There really is no decoder ring on this. There is no logic whatsoever to it. I have the worst case of ADD in the world. And so which is good for being a creative, but probably bad for staying in place for too long. No, look, everything I've done, before I did whatever I'm doing now, sort of led me here. I think, I went from, working at Clear Channel Communications and the Sierra Club to the Peace Corps, and then the Peace Corps to USAID, and USAID to the toy company, and the toy company to being a coach and a business and a leadership consultant. And all of those were really important to where I am today for multiple reasons. When I started the toy company, what I did at USAID and after Peace Corps was we helped former Soviet companies transform from a Soviet-based economy, a command economy, to a market economy. So we spent 7 years working with small businesses, medium-sized businesses, larger companies, factories, understanding the market and how to, learn how to manufacture based on the market need, not what was being told to them by the government. So helping transform companies. And so finally we decided, you know what, I've always been a follower of my gut too. And I listen to what my gut says. And after I did that for about 7 or 8 years, something said, hey, it's time for you to do something on your own. This is something in you that you need to fulfill to see if you can do this with a company of your own. And so a friend of mine working with me in that management consulting side, he and I quit and found a company in one product toy company in South Carolina. I won't tell you all the other companies we looked at. We looked at a dead body removal company that had a $5 million EBITDA, had patents on body bag, great business, couldn't get excited about it. But this little toy company we could really get excited about. And so we went about the massive task of making that just not a one product company, but an 80 product company, global, selling in 35 countries, manufacturing in China, and a private label manufacturer for big brands. So that was a challenge that we took on, and it was something in us that we wanted to fulfill. And when it was time to sell that, the gut once again said, look, you've done what you could do here. It's time to do something else. I realized in Peace Corps I love to teach, and I had some good mentors in Mark Thompson and Marshall Goldsmith saying, hey, you should be a coach. And there you go. And they were right.
Voila. Right.
Voila. And
so I want to unpack a couple of things you said there, because there's a lot there. So number one, other than sort of the academics that are in the thought leadership space, there really is no one path, right? There just isn't. So academics have to do certain things and publish and become a PhD, whatever. There is no MBA in thought leadership. There is no, this is the best school to go to for thought leadership. So, you joked about the ADD, and I would argue, myself included, probably 80% of the folks we work with have some level of ADD. And I think it's not that it is good or bad. It just is. And I think it manifests more in creatives. I think the magic trick is, how do you tame the beast, right? Because there's crazy ADD where, I mean, you literally can't sit with some folks for 20 minutes and have a cup of coffee and finish a conversation, and it's like ricochet rabbit all over the place. But then I think there's others that have, it's that gut and the intuition and the wisdom to go, I've done what I can do here, move on. And there's also the back burner going, and I'm bored, and I'm bored, and I'm bored, and I'm bored, right? Like the body bag business or the body removal company may have been a wiser decision. Who knows, right? But like you said, I couldn't get excited about removing dead bodies. And if you could, I would be disturbed if you said, yeah, I was really, this is my purpose. This is my why, is getting beating the flies to the flesh or something like that. But
yeah.
How do you know, is there times where you're going on both ends, like, I'm not sure if my intuition's really there, or I'm just bored, or I got to do, there's 23 other things I'd like to play with. How do you thread that needle? Because you've done it well.
I have to corral that. I'm a kid in a candy store, and a lot of people. And the interesting thing is that the more successful you get, the more visible you become with your thought, the more opportunities and more things that get thrown at you.
Yep.
And so it's a fantastic question. When I master that, I will let you know, and I'll come back on the show and tell you how I do it. For me, I get to sort of and I've been in this position several times in my life where I'm overcommitted, and I a lot of different things, and then you just have to sort of stop. And I mean, I did this with the business several times.
Yep.
And I'm actually in a process of, in the last few months, doing the same thing again. And that's just stopping everything you're doing, assessing what is the priority. Okay,
but that overcommitment is typically self-inflicted, right? It's the curse of there's so many things I'd love to do and could do, and my interesting friend suggested I do this. That sounds like fun, and I shake my head yes. Then I look at my calendar and go, oh shoot, like, how did I get here? I want to pivot for a moment to sort of the business side of the house. So you've got the consultancy. You write, you speak. How did you find your way to the business model that you're in today and land there in a way that you're comfortable with and you're happy with? And I'm sure it's always evolving and all that, but what were sort of maybe some trial and error, and what the business models are that work for you?
I resolved after leaving government and leaving the management consulting and with the toy company that I was going to do things that I really enjoyed and that were good for me and my soul. So that's sort of the criteria I use right now for everything I'm doing.
Okay.
I love the writing part. The writing part's cathartic for me. I started doing live interviews on LinkedIn about 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just love it. I love, like you do, having smart conversations, learning from people who are doing it and who have done it and who've been successful, and who are sharing that knowledge with others. Those conversations are fascinating, people who are at the top of their field. And so how I fell into I started writing for Inc. when we were an Inc. 500 company. I learned and learned how to start. I guess I started learning how to write in this way, those types of articles. And I've just kind of grown that. I realized at some point a few years ago that was a great way to, when you talk about thought leadership and leveraging thought leadership, it was a great entrance into conversations I would not normally had. When you call from Inc. and you want to do an interview with someone, they're more than willing.
Sure.
Same with Forbes. When I call and I say, hey, I'm doing an article for Forbes on this topic, would you mind speaking to me for a few minutes? Always the answer is yes. And so it's a way to have conversations I would not have normally had. I get clients because of it. I've seen increases in my prices, consulting and coaching because of it. And so, that first Inc. article and that Inc. column really sort of showed me the power of developing your thought leadership and having those platforms. And so now it's very intentional. The LinkedIn.
So let's play with that. So writing for Inc. or Forbes or whatever, there's a mutual trade-off. You're going to do the lion's share of the work, right? And they get the content, and it's their brand. And it gives you entree to places that you wouldn't have. I mean, there's plenty of places if you called and said, hey, I'm Rhett Power, I'd like to talk to you. They might or might not take the call. Inc. probably multiplies that by a factor of something, right? Like something significant. But on your LinkedIn Live, that's a totally different format, right? So conversations are much more organic, or at least we hope they are. right? And much more informal, although you could learn just as much. So I find, and I think this is where you're going. So for me, part of the reason I do the podcast is quite selfish. It's like, I love talking to smart and interesting people. I do it all the time. I might as well hit record and share it with others because it's an easy way for me to put stuff out there. I was blogging for years, and I don't think I'm a particularly good writer. I barely average, maybe. But I did it because it needed to be done, and it was a good way to get the message out there. I enjoy this far more. So I have sort of switch my efforts more in here. Have you found you putting more effort into LinkedIn Live versus writing, or how does that work for you?
Well, I'm like you. I'm an average writer, and what I found with LinkedIn Live is I can cheat a little bit. Is when you hit that record button, what happens is you have a 30 or 40-minute conversation that I can then transcribe and cheat, create an article, some written content out of.
Exactly.
And then I can create some recorded content. I can create a podcast out of the same thing. And so all of a sudden, I've got 3 forms of content that I had just from one recorded interview like we're doing today, right? And
1,000%. Because most people have never thought about content development through the lens of efficiency. We spend our days in business trying to Six Sigma and, I'm sure when you're in the toy business, how do I get the most out of every input and blah, blah, blah. Yet with our own time, we're pretty sloppy. Oh, I'm going to spend an hour writing a blog. Oh, I'm going to spend this. And the ability to extrapolate from one piece of content, multiple modalities and formats is really, the ultimate way to do things efficiently and effectively as it relates to thought leadership.
Indeed. I mean, and even today, I mean, I'd almost consider it a fourth form of it, which is, cutting up this 20-minute interview. Now you can cut it up into 4 different little interviews, right? You can cut it up into 3 or 4 different pieces and nuggets of short content, which is the way people consume stuff now. So it's got so many uses.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Got it. And you mentioned earlier, it's good for the brand, right? So that's good, right? So, why do people do what they do as it relates to thought leadership? One is from a brand standpoint to differentiate, to show the world that you have something different, unique, et cetera, to say that others might not, or you have a different approach. And it's not about pleasing everyone. It's showing everyone who you are and what you're about. And by the way, if you don't agree with that, that's fine too, right? The other piece is closer to the marketing and sales side is the net new client acquisition side. Have you noticed sort of the waves of that? Like in the beginning, it's more brand, and now people come to you and say, hey, I've read, watched, I've invested 3 hours in sort of rep world. I get who you are. Let's have a conversation. And not that they're throwing money at you per se, but they're much closer to the tail end of the buy cycle than they might have been before this. Is that resonate?
Oh yeah. And it honestly took years. There were periods where I'm like, why am I doing all this if it's not resulting in more dollars and more and less cost of client acquisition, really, time and money. And, really only in the last year and a half to 2 years where I think I've just got such a volume of content and the higher number of followers and that kind of stuff. It took years to build all that, to consciously build all that, intentionally build all of that. And really only now, I mean, probably 5 or 6 years into that, is it really starting to pay off in the sense that I'm not arguing over fees and rates, and I'm getting quality referrals. I mean,
there's an expectation that someone doing the things that you're doing is going to be charging commensurate with someone in those type of publications. I call it sort of the compound interest of content, right? Where, when you start, I'm an impatient person as well. And I knew when I started, for example, the blog, a friend of mine that had multiple successful blogs at the time, and I didn't start, I went to him and said, all right, give me some tips. And he said, you're impatient. And I said, I know. You like to measure and monitor everything. I said, I know. Neither of those are tips. Those are those are quirks or attributes. He goes, but before you start making any decisions, don't commit to one, commit to 100 blogs. And I was like, interesting. Because I'm impatient and I like to measure things. When I did the podcast, I said, all right, 50. I'll commit to 50. It's a lot of work, right? And then ultimately magic happens. But it is really frustrating in the beginning. We're like, damn, that was good. Really worked hard. I'm really proud of that. And like 3 people saw it, and 2 of them are your neighbors, and they're not buyers. You don't even know if they like you. Right? So, but I think you're right that you have to be determined and do it, and then ultimately, people that are sniffing you out see that you have this massive body of work, and you're not a fly by night. You've been thinking about this deeply for a long time.
Right. No, I mean, I love the way you put that. I mean, it just takes time, and you got to have the patience, and you got to have that. It's almost you have a work ethic around it, right? And a consistency.
Yeah.
That it takes a long time to build that up and to get that library, and that, because people do check you out, right? And they do look at your body of work, and but it does pay off, but it takes a while.
And that consistency piece is interesting, because what many people do is there's an inverse relationship between how busy they are in terms of paid work and content going out, right? So when I've got a lull, I put out a lot of stuff. When I'm really busy, you don't hear from me for weeks. That's really bad. We call that sort of the herky-jerky, that you have to, when you create stuff is fine. You can do that in tranches and such, but you have to consistently drip out whatever you do at the same cadence. So if you're doing, like, you've got power lunch, that's not power breakfast one day and power snack the next day. You have a time. So you're training people at this time of the week. You can expect, and that's almost a commitment I'm making to you, and I'll be there. And I think that's important, and people underestimate the importance of that.
The other thing I'd say too with all of this is, one of the huge benefits I've found in this is, I've just built these phenomenal relationships because of these platforms, right?
Yeah.
But we're getting to know each other and may do some work together, and the relationships you build, so that when you do put out content, you have people that can help you put it out, and if you're participating in that in that way, people are going to share your content. They're going to share it with their network, and when I have,
and they also share introductions, right? So we got introduced to a mutual friend through John Baldoni, who we both love and adore, and he connected us because he thought, hey, maybe we'd like to get to know one another. And he's right? When someone you admire, someone you respect says, hey, you should talk to this person, no brainer. Of course I'm going to talk to that person, right? And I think it is
referral business. That's how you build a referral business, right?
Yeah, and I think thought leadership is something that could be lonely and done in isolation, and that community and that camaraderie and all that is really important. As we start to wind down here, what would you recommend to someone that might resemble a young Rhett? They're going to the Peace Corps, and then they're going to start a toy company, and then they're going to work for the government, obviously, all the things that you would obviously do to do what you've done. What might you say to a young Rhett today that's on a path that they're uncertain of, but there's a thought leadership thread there?
I think listening to your intuition and your gut, sometimes we tune that out and we try to use the rational part of our brain. And, I think listening to your heart and figuring out where your heart is essential. You also is push yourself. Those companies, the toy company pushed me beyond measure, pushed me beyond in ways I never, ever thought I could be pushed. And it was a gut check on many occasions.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned and how I matured coming out of that was just a tremendous growth for me personally. And I know what I'm made of now. I know what I can, I know my thresholds, and I know,
sure.
And so, make sure to push yourself beyond what is comfortable, and don't, it's tough, gut it out and persevere, because that's when the real things happen. If we'd quit on some of those early times when it was really tough and it looked pretty bleak, then we wouldn't have got where we were, and we wouldn't have had those just tremendous aha moments and moments, sheer joy because we won and accomplished something. That moment, the first time I saw my product that I had drawn on a bar napkin sitting in a Toys R Us store.
That's cool.
You won't have those moments, sitting next to John Laster at the toy industry. You won't have those moments if you don't get through those gut check moments and those tough moments. So persevere.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing with us. Thanks for joining us. Lots of things in today's episodes to unpack and process and ponder. So thank you so much, Rhett. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Peter. It was great.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.